Okay, and welcome to the September 14th, 2023 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting for the City of Minneapolis. My name is Jacob Softly. I'll be chairing this meeting in the absence of Chair Perry. Will the clerk please call the roll so we can verify quorum?
Board Member Callahan.
Present.
Grants Korsch.
Present.
Hutchins is absent. Ingram.
Here.
Johannesson is absent. Perry is absent. Softly.
Aye.
Smikarova.
Here.
Wang.
Here.
We have 6 members present.
Okay, with 6 we have quorum and we are able to do business today. You've all seen a copy of the agenda. I'd like to invite a motion to approve the agenda or invite changes.
So moved.
Motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we have an approved agenda. Minutes from the last meeting. Are there any changes or are we ready to accept those minutes?
Move to adopt the minutes as proposed.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. That the minutes from the last meeting of the Board of Adjustment are adopted. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communications?
Yes, Vice Chair Softly, members of the board. 2 communications this evening. One, it is time to reapply if you are interested in applying for your seat again for seats 1, 2, and 3. So that's board members Smikarova, Softly, and Perry are up again, so please reapply if you are interested in. Otherwise, we're going to go broadly as well for hopefully have more applicants for the Board of Adjustment. The process has changed slightly as well. In the past, it was just sort of a PDF you would fill out online. Now that has changed into our LIMS system, the Legislative Information Management System, and it's kind of a more online application process in that sense. So.
Okay.
Number 2, just a brief note on the 2040 lawsuit. There's no formal communication from the city yet. We are still working with the city attorney's office, but I would like to make a note that projects before the Board of Adjustment this evening are fine and would comply with either the 2040 plan or the prior comprehensive plan, the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth. So the analysis you would find for finding 2 applies to both, and so we're good to move forward on that in relation to any orders from the judge.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. I'll now open the public hearing. We've got a variety of different items on our agenda today, most of which are slated for consent, but at least one of which is a discussion item. Did anyone come down here to speak in favor or against a project? Just indicate by putting your hand up in the air. Okay. So item number 5 is 3059 Ulysses Street Northeast. Staff is recommending this for consent. Item number 6 is 2201 East Lake of the Isles Parkway. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Item number 7 is 1435 Lakeview Avenue. Staff is recommending this for consent. Item number 8 is 4355 Nicollet Avenue. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Item number 9 is 300 40th Street West. Staff is recommending this item for consent. And item number 10, 711 West Lake Street. Staff is recommending denial. It's a discussion item. Number 11, 3927 Sheridan Avenue South. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here who came down to speak against item number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, or number 11? I see nobody. Would any members of the board like to pull any of those items from the consent agenda?
I just have a question for staff on
Sure.
number 5.
Number 5?
So in the staff report, they talked about how it needs to go before the park board for approval. What is the process for that around, like what approvals are they gonna make? Like how does the process work in relation to this item that's before us?
Thank you, Board Member Callahan, Vice Chair Softly. So the applicant would make an application to the park board that would receive a hearing, similar to what we do as well. My indication from the applicant as of this evening is that they are no longer pursuing that avenue. They're going to only develop on private land now.
Okay, so part of it was on parkland and part of it was,
Correct. So there is a portion of the turf area that was outside of the private property lines that was technically on park board land in the St. Anthony Parkway. So that portion of the application goes before the park board, and then the portion of the application that is the 0-foot setback from their property line on private property comes before the board for variances. So they're removing the turf that's going to be in the park board land. So it should be a better project overall for the city, but they no longer need that park board approval. They're just seeking the approval from the city for the variances for the private property.
so does that impact the percentage that is the impervious surface that variance that they need, or?
It does with the memo that I previously circulated, so it slightly increases. The overall percentage of impervious is decreasing when you consider the park board land, but there's a slight increase on the private property.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So does that impact, I guess, like how your findings, I guess like in terms of how they're changing it, does that impact your?
Correct, it does not. It does not impact our findings. We have an increase from 88% to 88.6%, but all of our findings remain the same, and we're still recommending approval.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'd entertain a motion, unless someone wants to pull a specific item from consent, I'd entertain a motion to put items 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 on the consent agenda for a vote consistent with staff
Chair
recommendation.
Softly, if I can just,
Yes.
if you'll allow me to interject, we've discovered an error on the agenda that these all refer to Planning Commission. Obviously, this is not the Planning Commission, so the Planning Commission is not making any recommendations to this body, but we just want to make sure that's included in the motion that's for the zoning board of
Sure,
adjustment.
thank you, Ms. Blanford, I should have pointed that out. In the staff reports, the first two lines say the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the City Planning Commission adopt staff findings. In this case, you can substitute Board of Zoning and Adjustment in place of City Planning Commission for items, all the items on the agenda today. That stands for 5 through 11. But I would entertain a motion for consent on items 5 through 9 and number 11.
So moved.
It's been a motion. A second by Wang. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Okay, with that, the ayes have it, and the motion is approved. If you came down for items 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 11, your projects are approved. Good luck with your projects. Thanks for coming down. Okay, item number 10. Is that you, Mr. Liska?
Good afternoon, board members. The application before you is located at 711 West Lake Street. The applicant is seeking to vary the screening standards. The Calhoun Building is a 6-story commercial building built around 1913. The structure fronts on Lake Street, and an alley runs along the western side of the property. There's a drive aisle and surface parking to the rear. HVAC and other similar mechanical equipment exist along the rear of the structure between the drive aisle and the parking. The existing dumpsters are positioned near the HVAC, again, near the rear of the structure. This area is a significant commercial node with the convergence of two goods and services corridors, Lake Street and Lindale Avenue. Zoning enforcement received a complaint and inspected the property and found the dumpsters were not in compliance of the screening requirements. The applicant is proposing to vary those screening requirements through this variance. The applicant provided several letters of support. Those were included in the initial packet. Additional letters have been forwarded to the board as well, also supporting this variance request. When evaluating a variance request, 3 findings must be met. First, challenges exist in complying with the ordinance. There is a narrow alley combined with a narrow drive aisle on this site. The narrow alley and the narrow drive aisle do make complying with the screening requirements challenging in the current location of those dumpsters. However, the zoning code doesn't require any surface parking to exist on site. There would be ample room to eliminate a space or two and to position dumpsters where they could be adequately screened further south on the site. So that first finding is not met. The second finding, the proposed variance to the required dumpster screening is not reasonable. Code is very specific in requiring screening when adjacent residential uses exist. There are adjacent residential uses along Aldrich Avenue there. The intent of this code is to keep those dumpsters more sightly when viewed from those residential areas. The last finding, the proposed variance would not alter the essential character of the area. It's my understanding that this dumpster has been unenclosed for quite some time. Staff does note that if granted, the variance may take away some of the enjoyment from those adjacent residential uses that are needing to look at a dumpster. So with that, staff recommends denial of this request. And I'll share a photo here as well that kind of demonstrates, again, the location of the dumpsters as well as the drive aisles. So again, we're looking at the back of the Calhoun building here. On the left there is the alley and the surface parking, again, further south on site. We referenced the area where a dumpster could be located and adequately screened would be where that handicap space is shown and where the vehicle is shown parked there. Obviously, the applicant would need to relocate that handicap space, but there are sufficient spaces within that existing lot to do so. I'm here for any questions. The applicant is also present.
Thank you, Mr. Liska. I have a question right off the bat. Is there any impediment to putting screening? You just said the dumpsters could be located on the opposite side of where they currently are. Is it possible to screen them where they currently exist? Or are there other aspects of that site that would make putting a fence in that spot particularly challenging?
I think the applicant may be able to speak to this better than me. It's my understanding that the narrow alley does create issues in the winter as far as getting this alley plowed. With that snow that gathers, the trash vehicle has a very hard time getting down that alley. So they do have some demonstrations that were included in the packet that show kind of the turning radius needed, and based on the narrow alley, based on the drive aisle, they demonstrate that there's no good spot for that in their estimation along that north side with the dumpsters enclosed.
Okay. And then did you engage in any discussions with the applicant about alternatives to a variance, other land use tools that might achieve a similar goal? Or is a variance the only option they really have other than compliance?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's the variance to those screening requirements or, enclose your dumpsters.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Liska? Yes, Ms. Mikurova.
Can you describe the nature of the complaint that came in that started the process?
In working with zoning enforcement, it sounded like there were several dumpsters on this block of Lindale that all received violation letters. This was one of many. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't have any specifics on that.
Oh, okay. I was sort of expecting sort of a resident or someone to have called it unsightly, but so does anyone on this block have a dumpster that's incompliant, or are they've all been cited, essentially?
There are compliant dumpsters. If I had a computer here, if you swivel basically this picture here, there's that pinball bar that's on Lindale. They constructed a new dumpster enclosure that borders this parking lot here. So there are definitely dumpsters that are meeting those standards in this vicinity. There are several others that are not or were not at the time of the inspection.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Grants-Korsch.
maybe this question is for the owner, but I'm just curious, are the 3 windows there that are shown, are they a residential unit? Right behind the dumpsters?
I think the applicant would better be able to
Right.
to answer
And
that.
and the applicant's going to speak to that?
I can answer it right now, they're not, they're all office.
They're all what?
All office floors 2 through 6, there's no residential in that building.
So the 3,
Let's hold on.
okay,
Mr.
sorry.
Braun, we'll either have you give testimony to that question during your time, or Mr. Liska can repeat that on the record, but we'll avoid having a discussion with the audience. Are there any other questions for staff? Seeing none. Okay, thank you, Mr. Liska.
I've got a couple of questions, may I?
That would be
Mr.
little.
Liska is presenting testimony here, I think I get some sort of an opportunity to...
Yeah, I was actually just going to call you up, Mr. Brown. If there's anyone here to speak in favor of the project or of the application, then please,
I'd like to ask him a couple...
please approach the podium and direct your questions to the board. And if it's a question that we can relate back to staff, we'll relate that back to staff at another time. Staff may come back up and answer questions for the board if we have them after your presentation. Otherwise, there's always an opportunity to engage with staff after the meeting and see what options are going forward for different forms of, compliance with city code or options for land use entitlements.
Thank you.
Sure. So by all means, if one member of your team at a time wants to come up and give testimony to the application.
I'd like to start with everybody else, just because it sort of lays a foundation for what we're talking about.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Sure, Mr. Braun.
And I'd like to do this with a PowerPoint. Does this show up on your screens?
We can see it. Yep.
And while this loads, thanks for the opportunity to be heard on this. Good to see that, oh, that's what we're seeing on the screens? Yeah, okay. I think I suspect that the application is loading. I don't know.
And then as typical for our public hearings, when you come up, just give your name and address for the record so that we have that.
We can get that out of the way. My name is John Braun, B-R-A-U-N. The address in question is 711 Lake Street. I'm here on behalf of 711 Lake Street LLC, which is the ownership entity for that building. The applicant, property manager, is sick with COVID today, so she apologizes that she can't be here and address you directly, but it's probably for the best. So, what we're asking for is a variance on the enclosure ordinance for 711 West Lake Street. And as you probably know, this is governed by Minnesota statute. 2 different statutes have substantially the same language. They require that our proposal be for a reasonable use that's not otherwise permitted. I think we've already established that it's not otherwise permitted. So the question there is this a reasonable use? That the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the landowner. So those are a couple of things that I'm going to be attempting to show you here in the next couple of minutes. And I think we've already, Mr. Liska has already conceded that the variance if granted will not alter the essential character of the locality. If there's any question about that, I'm happy to address it, but I think it's probably not a material issue. So when we talk about a reasonable manner, we have to have refuse containers. There are restaurants, there are businesses at this intersection. So having a garbage container isn't subject to being, questions about whether or not it's reasonable. We have to do that. So whether or not they're screened is the question. And what the ordinance requires is that the container be screened, and the language is such, it says, from sight by the street, from the street. That's of primary importance in the ordinance because that's the first thing that is cited. Screened from view from the street and from view from adjacent permitted residential uses. So if you look at what we're looking at here, here's a graphic that we had done by an architect who we hired to study this and provide a housing study or a site study for us. And I'm going to move my mouse around here just to make this a little easier. These are the dumpsters right here, these 2 lighter gray pieces. The medium gray is the slab that they sit on. This other in-between gray here is the back of the building. So the building has a couple of jogs in it here. and the dumpsters sit here. So the dumpsters as positioned are not visible from Lake Street or any other street in Minneapolis, because to the north, they're blocked by the building. To the east, they're blocked by the building. To the south, they're blocked by a commercial building, which contains the up-down establishment. And to the west, they're blocked by Bill's Imported Foods. So everything around here is commercial use. There is residential use over here, but you can't see the dumpsters from there. The only place that you can see them from is the townhouses down Aldrich in the 3000 block of Aldrich, adjacent to Bill's Imported Foods, and that's a peekaboo view from their parking lot. And that's, if you sort of follow this line of sight here, where my mouse is going, there you could see them from a residential use. My point being that if you're going to have a variance, this is pretty darn reasonable, where most of the requirements of that ordinance are already met. You can't see it from the street, and you can't see it from very much residential property. It's not sitting out in plain sight. It's not in the middle of an occupied residential area. The circumstances unique to 711 Lake Street, as Mr. Liska said, is built in 1913. It was built as an athletics and social club called the Calhoun Club. Lots of great history with the building. Right now, it has one floor of restaurant, one floor of commercial retail space, 2 establishments there plus a theater, and 5 floors of office above. There's no residential, to answer the council member's earlier question about the residential. It is entirely commercial use. And the refuse containers that we're talking about serve a whole lot more than just 711 West Lake Street, and that's the kind of the crux of the problem here. So let me just give you an overhead view. And what you're looking at here is the overhead view of 711 Lake Street, which is this area here. It says Steamship Games. The alley runs where my mouse is. These are the dumpsters. This is the parking area. And the buildings fronting Lake Street here, Lyndale here, form a kind of a big C. There's no access from the street or anywhere else in this entire run of buildings. This is all closed off. So in order to get to the back of the adjacent buildings, you have to come through here. And you can see how small this gets. And this is the only place to get to the rear of these buildings, is the only service entrances. So all of the deliveries for everything that happens in all of these buildings, and that's Rectangle Pizza, Caffrey's Deli, Smitten Kitten, now Fool Me Once, which just opened, Volstead's, the Pangea World Theater, Steamship Games, everything, all of the service businesses that are in these buildings, their only service access is through this little alley. And they don't have the ability to place their trash anywhere apart from in our dumpsters. So in order to keep the neighborhood from descending into a chaos of individual garbage storage and delivery methods and unsightly cans everywhere, we have an agreement with these other businesses on the block that they can pitch in to our collection, and they can put their garbage and their recycling. And it's important to note that this entire unit right here is just for recycling for this corner. They're able to contribute to the cost of that and to use that space. Those dumpsters, as large as they are emptied almost every single day. They're emptied 6 times a week at about 5 o'clock in the morning. So right now, 12 residences, 2 restaurants, in addition to 711 Lake Street, and 4 retail businesses at Lyndale and Lake use those dumpsters. And we've analyzed this pretty carefully, what we can do, because from the aesthetic standpoint, everybody in this room is on the same page. We don't want to look at garbage either, especially where we have restaurant patrons walking, right past the dumpster. I would love not to have that be the case. In fact, we examined this question about doing this ourselves in order to improve the aesthetics on the building several years ago, and came to the conclusion that we couldn't do it. So our only option now, if we are forced to build an enclosure, is we're going to discontinue that agreement with the rest of the businesses and the rest of the residences in that community, and make a small enclosure with containers only large enough to serve 7-Eleven West Lake Street. I don't know where Caffrey's Deli is going to go with their food waste. Probably plastic containers or plastic bags that they put out on Lake Street or Lindale or carry home. I don't know how they're going to do that, but they're not going to do it in our dumpsters. I don't know how Rectangle's going to, what they're going to do with their recycling. I assume that they're going to have it on Lindale or on Lake Street. They don't have any access. And for that matter, they don't even have an easement across the property. That's something else we've granted them, to be able to bring their stuff out to our dumpsters. So what does that look like? It looks like this. It looks like, and we've had several of our neighbors do this in the past, where they'll have individual containers. Now, these aren't ours. That's on our parking space. We're not going to build an enclosure on our real estate for someone else's garbage. So that's how that's going to look going forward. That's another one. That was taken today. That's around the corner behind the new restaurant, Fool Me Once. We don't have an agreement with them yet to use our dumpster. So what are they doing? They're doing that. I'd much rather look at 2 steel, well-contained, rat-proof dumpsters than look at that behind a food business. Another circumstance that's unique to 7-Eleven West Lake is the traffic is heavily constricted. Now, the photo that you saw that Mr. Liska presented up there, I have the same photo here. That came from Google Earth. I don't believe Mr. Liska personally visited this property. I don't believe Mr. Liska took any photos from a visit of this property. I encourage you to ask him both of those questions when you get an opportunity. I took the same photograph with my iPhone. Google Earth doesn't tell the whole story, and if you're making policy decisions based on Google Earth, you are not fully informed. That's the same picture taken today with my phone. Parked there is a 2003 Chevrolet Silverado. That's a 20-foot vehicle. The most common vehicle sold in the United States in 2022 was a Chevrolet Silverado, but the new one is 2 feet longer than that truck. Another 2 feet, another 24 inches out into that alleyway. And then 12 residences and countless businesses are expected to do their deliveries and run in and out of that parking lot. And you can see where the dumpsters are currently located. The other photograph that Mr. Liska shared with me earlier is this one, also taken by Google Earth. Looking the other way from those, it looks like there's a whole lot of room there until you switch to the iPhone photograph from the same place, and you see how narrow that passway is. So we hired an architect to analyze whether or not this could be done. And it's in your package. Here is the car turning radius analysis, and with the dumpsters in, and as Mr. Liska, to his credit, has acknowledged, it's probably impossible to build the enclosure where the dumpsters are right now, and I'll get to the other issues in a second. But enclosing where the dumpsters are right now, even a vehicle as small as a Ford Escape SUV, a 14-foot car, can't make that turn. Not without going into the handicap parking space, the adjacent parking space, or hitting one of the bollards. The garbage trucks can't do it either. And we talked to our garbage hauler, Aspen Waste, and asked them about what would happen if we put an enclosure in there. And they said, we will drop you as a customer. And here's their letter. And there are a couple reasons for that. They need to access the dumpsters at an angle, so the dumpsters can't be squared off against the building because the trucks have to come in and start making a turn and pick them up. So the doors would have to be enormous to do this. They will open out into the alleyway and into our parking area. And even if you look at this analysis of where they have to go, they can't reach that without hitting a bollard. And there's the bollard that guards the corner of that structure. And that's as small as we can make that thing. They're also concerned about overhead wires. And here's a picture from today with those overhead wires directly over the dumpster. So when they pick these metal dumpsters up with these enormous garbage trucks, they have to do that in exactly the right orientation and put them back in exactly the right orientation, or they're going to hit those wires. So I don't imagine that Aspen wants to turn down business, refuse business, but if you look at their letter, that's exactly what they've said. We cannot service the trash and recycling if the containers are enclosed. So another aspect, a unique aspect of 711 West Lake Street, and particularly this rear parking area, is that it has unusually high foot and vehicle traffic. And there are two reasons for that. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, it accesses the service entrances for all of the buildings and residences along that corner of Lindale and Lake. But on top of that, if you look at the bottom of this picture, and I'm circling it right now, there's the entrance to Volstead's Emporium. That's the speakeasy jazz bar that's located in the basement of 711 West Lake Street. So all of the patrons for Volstead's Emporium are coming and going out of that door and through that parking area. And what they do, this is their path right here, and this corner would be enclosed, that bollard would go about here in order to have a structure that encloses these, which would make a blind corner for pedestrians coming in this frame towards you, towards the alley, so that the very moment that they are aware of a vehicle is the moment that they step into the line of travel of that vehicle. They don't, right now, they've got the line of sight around the dumpsters. The dumpsters aren't so tall that they can't see over them, especially when the lid's open like this. If we enclose them, they don't have the ability to do that. So right now, they walk right here, around this corner. They can see if there's oncoming traffic. And what I've got here is this is 2 minutes. This is last Saturday between 7 and 8 p.m. This is, and I apologize, this is taken on my phone. This is a high-speed version of what 1 hour of traffic looks like in that parking lot. Had a near miss right there. On a busy night at Volstead's, 400 people come in the door. That means 400 people leave. That means 800 people pass the corner where our parking lot intersects the alley. And 800 people have to be certain that they're not going to be hit by something. This is 1 hour on a weekend night, but this is what it's like frequently in that back parking lot. This is not a normal commercial building's backyard, back parking area. There are some very unusual characteristics that this place has. And I'll stop boring you with my video. The final piece, as Mr. Liska also noted, is that winter conditions are very prohibitive of an enclosure. And last February, Aspen notified us, Aspen Waste is our refuse hauler, notified us that they would no longer be able to get their trucks down our alley. We asked why. They said the snow and ice ruts are so deep that the trucks can't pass. Now, this alley is served by the city of Minneapolis. That's who's supposed to remove the snow and ice. Unfortunately, right here, where the alley meets the sidewalk, when Lake Street was rebuilt, is taller. So the alley doesn't drain properly into Lake Street. There's always puddles, you can see them right here. And when we have a winter like we had, ice builds up on this alley. Ice built up to 10-inch ruts, 10-inch ruts, such that a car couldn't pass. They were scraping their undercarriage. They'd get caught. If you had a pickup, you could get through. I personally called the city of Minneapolis and requested that they remedy that problem. They did not. A few days later, with, as you can see, the garbage, that's 2 days of garbage, by the way, piling up from all of the establishments on the corner. We hired a bobcat and we chipped, and you can see how bad the ruts are here. We chipped the ice off of the alley that the city didn't remove. Now, if you look at where this sits, if a door has to open out of this enclosure, it's going to go into that alley. It's going to need to open right over where that ice pack builds up and where the city has not had the, for whatever reason, has not had the desire to maintain that. So to wrap it up, and I'm going to go back and address the thing with what Mr. Liska was saying, it's a reasonable use because not much residential. I mean, it is an exception. That's what a variance is, but it's not a grotesque exception. It can't be seen from the street. It can't be seen from very much residential. The unique circumstances are the size of the plot, the human and automobile traffic, the unique use of the dumpsters, and the fact that we have a shared container arrangement which actually keeps less garbage in the sight of the public as opposed to having more of it. And there's no change to the essential nature of 711 West Lake. I need to run back here to a plat and show you something. Mr. Liska proposes that instead of having the dumpsters where they are, that we could put them over in our parking lot because there's no requirement to have parking for this building. 60,000 square foot building. We are the only handicap parking spot on the block. There's one. We allow anybody to park there. You don't need our building permit. A handicap parking space needs adjacent maneuvering room. You can't put a handicap parking space in between two walls because the people who use them need to get out of a vehicle and have a wheelchair topper or something deliver their wheelchair or other mobility device. So you can't have a handicap parking space in a vacuum. You gotta have some room next to it. This one frequently gets used by one of our own tenants who uses a van, and for that reason they need to have some room. So if we were to take and put these two dumpsters in our parking lot, that's going to take these two spaces. Then our handicap takes these two spaces. That leaves us with one ordinary use parking space. One. For a 7-floor, 60,000 square foot building. That doesn't sound like a reasonable ask from our perspective. So here's what we'll do, and we're not going to do that. Here's what we'll do. We will reduce our garbage containment to smaller containers. We'll put a smaller enclosure up next to the building, and everybody else on the block is going to have to fend for themselves. I understand that your planner recommends denying this variance. I would encourage you to think very long and hard about that and about what you've learned here and may learn from others before you do that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Braun. I have a quick question before I open it up to the rest of the board here. You talk about the agreement that you have with your neighbors to
Yes.
handle trash service. Do we have any guarantees that that agreement stays in place in the future?
Yeah,
Do
the guarantee is
have
that,
any requirement to honor that agreement in the future, I guess?
do we have
Yeah, are you required to provide them trash service? Or
we are not required to provide them trash service. We've done this for quite a number of years, and what keeps us wanting to do it is that, frankly, people throw stuff in our dumpster anyway. And we've had that where we had one business that was a troublesome business on the block that's now gone, that we did not agree to that, and we wound up having fights over the dumpster because they just put stuff in there anyway. But what keeps both they and us interested in doing that is for them, it's a much smaller pain in the neck for the getting rid of their trash. And for us, it looks a whole lot better than having 15 or 20 or 25 individual tipped over trash containment units in disarray all over, and in particular parking in our parking lot against our will, right? And what the reality is here, several of these buildings have an easement, and the language of the easement is for alley and garbage access. Doesn't mean they can park anything on our property, but they can walk across. Then they got to park their stuff in the alley, I guess. But we've allowed a few to use some of our space just as a convenience because all the business owners in the community kind of got to get along.
Okay, and so that easement doesn't give them the right to place trash,
Correct.
just to access the trash?
Right, and it's a very old, I mean, it's a 100-year-old easement, right? And so it's drafted in a very simple fashion and long before these were the kind of concerns that they were addressing.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Braun? Okay,
Right.
I have one more. I need to get my head wrapped back around that question. Your neighbor to the south uses a enclosure structure that requires a little manual maneuvering. I don't know if they have a gate that swings open or if they pull the trash out sideways. Is a manual option feasible? And if yes, why haven't you explored that, today?
They are set back from the alley, so you don't see that on this block, but our building goes all the way to the alley. We are the edge of the alley is the wall of the building. There's a zero setback there. That building, and I might be able to find it here. Give me just a second.
I think if you go forward 3 pictures, you can see the side of the, you can see the
Yeah,
north side of the enclosure.
and they can do that because their building doesn't come all the way to the alley. So there's room in between the edge of the alley and their building for their enclosure. And we don't have that.
Would you be able to pull your dumpsters into the alley?
Not the dumpsters we have. They're 1,000 pounds. I mean, they're giant steel things. I've tried to move them when the company doesn't place them exactly where they belong, and you can do that if you have a truck. You can push them, but 2 people can't move them.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to be picked up. I mean, this is predicated on continuing to have large dumpsters and have this arrangement that we have. If we go to smaller containers, they might be movable, but that sort of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here. So,
Okay. And then I have one more question. You cited that if you removed the handicap stall and you slid it further to the east, you'd only have, you said 1 or 2 parking spaces left?
we would have 1 handicap and 1 ordinary use parking space. What you're seeing on the sketch that's up here, the last 2 and the cars are sort of inelegantly placed in there in that photograph are not ours.
Okay.
Those belong to the adjacent. In fact, one of the other fellows that is here today has 2 parking spots at the end of it, so those aren't ours.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful for understanding the site plan and where the lines are. Okay, Mr. Braun, I have no more questions. Thank you.
Anybody? All right, thank you very much for your time. I understand I probably went a little long, but I appreciate you hearing me out.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the application, or in favor of the application? Yeah, come on up. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Brian Jones. I am representing the 3008 Lindale Avenue South property. We are the property that Mr. Braun is pointing out that has the 2 parking spaces here. And this is the edge of my property, is the white line that you kind of see in the picture there. I'll be very brief. I don't have much to add that Mr. Braun hasn't already detailed, but we purchased that building in 2009. We've been good owners and good neighbors. We've made several improvements to our property and the building, and we strive to keep the area clean. I have a business owner who is in the property who employs people, his employees, walk through the alley and clean up the alley on a daily basis. We've been there for, like I said, 15 years. I wanted to come here today and express my total support for the variance to the dumpster enclosure that was applied. We have an extremely tight alley space, as has been detailed. Parking is tremendously tight. Access to the back of the building is very limited. Navigation around the dumpster and the parked vehicles is difficult. Adding fenced enclosures would make this all very much worse. In my opinion, and as we have been detailed, it would eliminate vital parking spaces, create an issue with snow removal, which is already difficult, and make access to the back of my building even more complicated than it already is. The most important reason that I support this variance is how negatively a fenced enclosure would impede garbage and recycling removal. Mr. Braun has gone through painstaking detail to show you how difficult this area is with turning radiuses, with trucks, with access, with traffic, all of those sort of things. I personally have witnessed garbage trucks struggle to pick up dumpsters on more than one occasion. There's little room to maneuver in the alley, and there's power lines above the alley. So you are taking a small space, and instead of just having 2 dimensions where you have walls on either side, you have something you have to worry about above you. And all of a sudden you have 3 planes of worry for those drivers and those dumpsters. Snow removal is problematic at best. The small area, last year we had huge ruts, ice. We spent quite a bit of time with shovels and picks and ice chippers trying to clear the ice, clear the chunks and the ruts, just so people could get through. Some of my residents got stuck. We would go down there and help them get out of their ruts and then encourage them to find other places to park. So there are several restaurants and retail stores that all share this alley. As Mr. Braun detailed, we have an agreement with them to service, pay part of their trash bill so that we can use their dumpsters. I've been here for 15 years. We've tried every different method that you can imagine. We had rolling 96-gallon carts. We had separate recycling carts. We eliminated recycling because it became problematic. We used 2-yard dumpsters on wheels. We used stationary dumpsters that were trying to be serviced by smaller garbage hauler trucks. We've tried everything. It's impossible for these trucks to get to this area back here where we would be able to store our trash. And the other problem that we have is that with small containers, you get spillover. And the best meaning people miss. And there's trash all over the alley. And then it gets cold, and then it freezes, and then you have trash frozen onto the alley for a period of time until it thaws, and then we're out there with shovels cleaning up again. So it's a very difficult area. It would be likened to having to roll your garbage can, 50 yards down an alley that is not being plowed. And you have to drag it through big ruts of snow, big ruts of ice, and hopefully it gets there and hopefully it gets picked up on time. And then you bring it back. So we have many great conversations with John, with the owner of the property that he is representing, the other owners of the properties in the alley. We work together, we keep the area clean, and I just shudder to think what would happen if we had to go back to the trash removal service that we've had in the past, which is not very effective at all. I really strongly recommend council to take a closer look at this area. I really would like a reconsideration. I'd be happy to meet anybody down there. I'm down there almost every day cleaning up trash that people miss and show them the limitations we have in the area. It's very tight, and I think a garbage enclosure would make it even worse. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. Is there anyone else here to speak on behalf of the application?
I'm Lloyd Drilling. I own 705, 707, and 709 West Lake Street, which is adjacent to these buildings.
Sure, and your name again, sir?
Lloyd Drilling.
Lloyd Drilling?
John, could you give me an overhead on this thing of the layout? Or can you switch us here? Yeah, we can.
Is that okay with everybody here?
I just
Yeah.
want different, show them
I pulled the,
oh, did you? Oh, okay. That's not that. If it's going to take a while to reload.
and you're wanting
Just an over, there you go. Yeah, there you go. So you guys can see this, where it says Thurston Jewelers, that's 705 West Lake Street, and it wraps around to Rectangle Pizza to the east. These two buildings used to be together. I own both of those, and we had a separate PID made to separate them. So, and that left the Rectangle Pizza without any access at all through the alley and to, out to the alley for their garbage. And there's other buildings across the street that are having this fight right now. There's a building, it has, used to have a bike shop in it, if you're familiar with the Chicago hot dog building on the corner. These buildings don't have any garbage access. They don't have any way of getting their garbage out. They even built a door out that was going to access to Lake Street, to roll their garbage out on the Lake Street, but that didn't go, and whatever happened there, I don't know. Well, anyway, both these buildings are empty right now, and it's a big issue of how feasible these buildings are for other people to even be able to habitate them, because they don't have any access anyway to handle their garbage. And I guess what I'm saying here is, you have a group of people here, you got a group of people that are really working together in a really good way to keep this corner going. Because this corner is a good corner right now. But these corners have a lot of challenges right now. You have Uptown, well, you know, the real Hennep and Lake. I mean, you got a lot of empty buildings here. You've got empty buildings starting to come around. And here you have a little group of people who are really making an effort to do it the right way. And, you know, these buildings were designed back in 1913. And I've owned this building for 30, 40 years. And to see a group of people come in and want to make an effort to make this right and to do what needs to be done is very commendable. And when you look at like a variance like this makes common sense, because the property is so unique and how it was designed years ago and stuff. This is the way things developed, and this is what it takes to make these things a good corner for the neighborhood. And I mean, it's a vibrant neighborhood, and it works really well. And with, you know, the board and you guys and your adjustment and things like that, you know, this is what's good about it. You guys have the ability to look at each thing and make a decision on what is good for a neighborhood. So just ask you to really consider this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Drilling. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? Okay, I see nobody. Is there anyone here to speak against the application? I see no one. I'll close the public hearing. Board comment.
Comment.
Ms. Wang.
So with the challenges to the property, I do see something with safety and health, but it's not something that we would use for finding one, because the circumstances for this particular property are created by people who have interest in it, right? We're talking about the businesses, Volstead's, Rectangle. But on the other hand, there's businesses, nightlife in the area, and the way that this particular property is uniquely positioned towards the alleyway as opposed to the other adjacent property who is not completely against the alleyway. For finding two, I think the applicant request is reasonable, but I'm having trouble finding arguments against staff findings, which is why I'm on the fence. But obviously my arguments for 1 and 2 fall short, so I'm on the fence. So I'm interested to hear what my fellow board members have to say about this.
Can I clarify the comment you made about the alley? Were you talking about the
garbage.
the idea that the building is built directly upon the alley with no additional, it's not set back at all, it's a zero lot line build?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Grants-Korsch.
Yeah, I think this is a really great example where planning staff has done a great job at following the rules. And I appreciate that. And I think that that's really commendable. But I also think that that's the reason why this board exists, is to look at some of those difficult and practical pieces. I hate to be held hostage, let me see, between 2 rat-proof containers and 25 rat-filled containers that end up on Lake Street in Lyndale. Because seeing 25 small containers on Lake Street in Lyndale, to me, is not acceptable. Now, that's not in the planning code, so I can't blame the planning professional. He did his job, and I think that's right. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, and I commend you for it. But I think that we, as the board, need to put on our practical hat and say we need to commend a group that has coalesced together, and it is more effective, efficient, and energy as well as environmentally friendly to have 2 large containers than it is to have 25 or 40 or 50 little blue and green and black containers polluting Lake Street and Lindale. So again, I think it's always hard to go against staff findings because they are correct and they are right. But in this particular instance, where we have and your question, by the way, was absolutely excellent, that is this going to continue? Because obviously, if we're going to start seeing it discontinue with a different owner or something like that, that might be, that we might well even include on this, that this is a variance contingent on the fact that they continue to use this common container piece. I mean, maybe that's a possibility to have that be in the motion. But I really think that we are being disrespectful to 12 residents, 2 restaurants, and 4 retails if we don't acknowledge the fact that they have collaborated, cooperated, and are doing a better job efficiently, effectively, and environmentally for this area. So again, it's always hard to vote against staff because they are correct. But I think given the unique set of circumstances here, that's what a board should do, is it should look at the broader picture and evaluate all the other kind of nuances. So I would actually propose a motion, if that's appropriate, or do you want to hear more discussion first?
By all means, if you'd like to make a motion, that's
I'd like
your
to
right.
propose a motion that we accept the variance pending continued use of a cooperative garbage container use.
May I ask a clarifying question on that condition?
Sure.
Would you require them to provide trash services for their neighbors, or would you merely require them to have discussions about providing trash services?
I don't know
for
if that we
neighbors?
can require that, but I think what we could do is if they start, and John, let's say that you get hit by a car and forget, you decide to not have your building anymore and decide to be a jerk and sell it to somebody else. I guess my concern, would be that we can't require them, but we could certainly then go back to the planning commissioner Liska's suggestion that they must have an enclosure then. I mean, then all bets would be off if they decide to not do a cooperative agreement.
And so your condition would be on the existence of
Right.
trash service,
Right.
and that failure to provide trash service would violate the
Would
condition.
then kick into the denial.
Ms.
I also too, I mean, I don't know if any of you
Hold on,
read
Ms.
this,
Lang.
but I was also impressed too that even a fellow city employee, and I was a little confused here. She's a senior legal support specialist with MCDA, Minneapolis Community Development Economic. We don't own, Minneapolis Community Development Economic doesn't own that building, right? She's just a resident of that building? Is that what this letter is implying?
That's my understanding, is that her letter was as a resident of the building.
Okay.
Because she would have received notice of the public hearing.
Okay. Yeah, but again, I'm impressed with her statement as an upstanding citizen, that she realizes how important it is for environmental, economic, and efficiency reasons to have 2 large containers rather than 25 or 50 small containers littering Lake and Lindale.
Okay, so there has been a motion. We're having discussion on that motion now. Ms. Wang, you had a comment?
For the sake of time and clarification, so what is the argument for finding 1 and 2 for the motion?
Mr. Ellis, looks like you have something you'd like to throw in.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Softly, members of the board. I just want to be clear, we would not, assuming that the board makes the findings and then has the condition of approval, I would want to know, we cannot condition that they continue to provide trash service for residents other than their own building, but it could be something along like continues to maintain the larger dumpsters, something along those lines, but we can't make them provide trash service for other people. So.
Whatever you want, I'll put it in. How's that?
Well, Ms. Grants-Korsch, how, would you provide a little more background into supporting finding number 1 and finding number 2 to answer Ms. Wang's question?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding the 1 and 2 here.
It would be in the staff packet.
Do I really need to go into the level of detail on that when I thought I was pretty clear that I understand? Okay, and I'm going to have to spend some time.
What component
here.
of the
I have to spend some time pulling that up because I didn't have it up again.
no, I understand that. So the first finding is whether or not a practical difficulty exists in complying with the ordinance that
Thank you.
is unique to the property and not created by the applicant.
Well, it's not about economic considerations alone. The narrow alley and the confluence, he could put 2 small containers that just fill his building, and he could build it. He said that. He could put 2 small containers and build an enclosure around it. But he's doing a larger container to the benefit of having all the other businesses, 2 restaurants, 12 residential units, and 4 retails. So what this does not include, and I suggest that, and in fairness, I don't know if you knew that. I don't know if the planner knew that. And now that we know all of that, it is a problem that this is a unique circumstance because of the way in which it is the actual garbage is being used. And the second piece, the spirit and intent of the ordinance, I can only suggest that the diagram that he showed, showing that it is not visually seen from Lake Street and is not visually seen from Lindale, and only, he's called it a peekaboo view from another adjacent building. I guess I think that it is keeping with the spirit of the comprehensive plan to maintain environmental improvements in our community. I mean, the fact that, again, it is far less of a burden environmentally to pick up 2 large containers than it is to pick up 25 to 50 small containers that come from 12 residents, 2 restaurants, and 4 retail areas. So, I mean, I apologize if I'm not specifically addressing these. I'm going to the broader picture of purpose, and I think that's the benefit of a board like this, is that we don't go to the letter of the planning rules and regulations, because that's what was excellently presented by our planner, Andrew Leska. But this is a little different situation where, again, 2 rat-proof containers is better than 25 to 50 small containers.
Ms. Wang, does that answer the question that you had? Yes. Okay. Well, so there's been a motion, we're having discussion. Is there a second on the motion? Going once?
Wow.
Twice?
Wow.
The motion has failed. Board comment?
I just wanted to note that the staff findings are based on that in order to comply, they would have to give up a parking space or several parking spaces. And since parking is not required and that's not part of the code, then that's sort of the basis for the argument, is that they don't need a variance because they could give up a parking space and still accomplish the in compliance garbage situation. Now, I think that there are unique challenges to the property which have been described. I do think that it is reasonable to operate their garbage the way that they are currently operating, because I don't think that it's seen from residential spaces, which is what's quoted significantly. And then the third finding that it wouldn't alter the essential character, that one is tough, since apparently a lot of these locations in the alley have received citations and therefore might come before us looking for a variance. And if we were to approve this one, then we would give them precedent to get approved for theirs, thereby altering the essential character of the block, if not the code itself. So I'm very close, and I think that there is an argument that it wouldn't adjust the essential character because in this part of town, they all work together to share garbage in this one location. So for them, their character is they all share the garbage and no one has individual garbages, or not, there are not that as many individual garbage locations. But it's really tricky because the others that don't share that location, that are not in compliance, would then be seeking variances, and each of them couldn't possibly have the same unique setup. They couldn't possibly have the same lot line issues and that of that nature. So that's where I'm struggling with the approval, is not counting all the findings. But I do think that 1 and 2 are very strong.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mikarova. And one of the things I'm constantly struck by with this application is that a lot of the challenges seem to be based on the use of the property. And not to spin myself into put too fine a point on it, but you know, the use is intended to drive people to and from the property. You know, in a commercial sense, you need to have people coming and going. And to say that that use is then specific or not a practical difficulty does seem a little silly to me in a commercial context, but when I step back, I say the use is driving the uniqueness. If these property owners weren't all cooperating together, we wouldn't have the great story about how it works currently. And we can't guarantee that it will work well in the future, even if we grant the variance. The presence of cars in the back lot, while we can have a debate about whether there should or shouldn't be cars or how important that is or isn't to the city, to the neighborhood, to the buildings, you know, as cars keep getting bigger and bigger, we can't make more space in that parking lot for bigger cars. To the extent that you have people using the back entrance as a primary entrance, maybe it's an inconsistent idea. Maybe the idea of putting cars and people in that space is inconsistent. And when I think about all these things wrapped up in one, I even am struggling to understand to what extent is that practical difficulty, which I think there are practical difficulties with what is going on here with the use of the property, but to what extent is that based on the property, and to what extent is that based on the use of the property? And separating those two is a challenge.
Thank you, Vice Chair Softly. I agree with other comments that have been made. I think there is the issue that is before us, to me, has a short-term solution at place right now in terms of how the property owners are cooperating. They've developed a solution that works for the property and the uses that are there today. But I worry that in granting this variance to what Member Shmirkova has already alluded to, that it sets a precedent for an issue with a long-term challenge for, it doesn't provide a long-term solution for what is happening at that site, where if the use is turned over, if the owner changed over, that there's no guarantee that the owners would continue to collaborate and provide dumpster access, and that there would still be, and that by not providing screening, that there would still be a solution with this dumpster issue. I think there's in addition to the aesthetic issue that has been raised around visibility, which I agree with others' comments that I don't think that there's really a residential visibility issue here, or if it is, it's minor. I do have some concerns about, and the dumpsters, you know, which had already been alluded to by Mr. Braun, that sometimes when the dumpsters are being placed back, they're blocking the alleyway, which are heavy to move and also have an access issue. So there's a confluence of things here that this dumpster screening issue is raising around, you know, trash and public safety and access and public health. And I'm not sure that approving this variance would solve those problems that are going to exist in the long term. And I think I'm not sure that approving this variance is actually going to solve these other long-term issues that we're seeing that are being raised by both staff as well as the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Callahan. Ms. Smukrova.
correct, we cannot force them to keep this agreement in place, but they could also choose to have a covenant on the deed or something of that nature that would be tied to the property in perpetuity or for 90 years or something of nature, despite whoever purchased or sold the property. We also cannot mandate that they do that to their deed, but that is an option for keeping an agreement with property. And it's very similar to our variances, which live with the property and not with the property owners and not with the business owners. So it's a very similar consideration for what we are approving, how long it will last. You know, things happen all the time. If this building became completely residential for some reason, which is not really financially feasible, it became for some reason, then you've got this ginormous residential property that now does or does not have the appropriate amount of garbage service or coverage or care, what kind of thing. So just a note.
Yeah, Ms. Callahan, and then Mr. Ingraham.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Ms.
I
Callahan.
guess I would sort of encourage the applicant to pursue, continue this collaboration and working together and perhaps formalize some of that in, a business improvement district or other ways that you can formalize this informal collaboration that has happened. Because I understand that there are some issues in terms of the site use and the way that how all of these different businesses coexist. But I would just encourage you to sort of formalize some of that informal collaboration that has been happening already.
Mr. Ingraham.
Thank you. My question is for the rest of the board, and it kind of goes with the practical difficulty. We talked about use and how the uses can change, but the easement will still be there for the foreseeable future as well right now. Does that have any impact on the use and the way those pair together?
I'll comment as briefly as I can on this. Without seeing the easement, it's impossible to be sure. Based on the testimony from the applicant, it sounds like there's the right to access trash to and through the alley. So, and perhaps he can correct me if I'm wrong here, but if one of the neighboring property owners who benefits from the easement has a trash dumpster in the rear of their building, they're allowed to bring that trash dumpster through the subject property to the alley for disposal. Mr. Braun, do I have that correct? Okay, so they can traverse the alley through through the rear of the property, but they cannot park or otherwise use that space.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Okay. Ms. Grants-Korsch.
I'm just curious, Commissioner Callahan, I'm unclear why you want to have, are you suggesting that if they do some sort of writing agreement, that then they could maybe come back to get a variance? Because what difference would that make? I mean, frankly, the uses of these buildings, they are always going to generate junk. They are always going to generate trash and recycling, all of them, no matter what the use of the building is. Whether it's 4 restaurants, whether 2 restaurants, 4 retail, 2 retail, whether it's office buildings or residential, it's always going to be generating garbage and recycle. So I fail to kind of see, it's not so much that it's the use, it's got to do with the location and the actual problematic issues with the sizing of the area. And yes, it is reducing, that parking is not required, yeah, right. But let's face it, to only have 6 parking spaces for 60,000 square feet in a 7-story building, that's not exactly generous by any means. So I guess I just still go back to what good would that do to have something codified? Could you explain that to me, please?
My comment is more around, there's a number of issues that they've alluded to on their site. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. My comment is more that there are as they've discussed, a number of issues at the site, including the trash that both at the dumpster, which is before us tonight, but also in terms of there's staff cleaning the area of the parking lot. There's other businesses there that are not using the dumpsters, that have their own trash. And Yes, well, maybe I misunderstood, but there was a photo that you showed of some individual waste containers that one of the restaurants, Fool Me Once, is not part of the dumpster agreement. Is that incorrect? That's correct. They just opened and yeah, so they have their own waste receptacles. So clearly there's a number of uses and pedestrians and cars that are needing to access that space as well as service access. Okay, I'm not really addressing that piece of it. My point was to address Chairmember Grant's Korsh, the comment around like a business improvement district or some way of formalizing it is to ensure that there's also a perpetuity in terms of the business owners collaborating and providing some sort of rules of engagement in terms of the uses of the property moving forward and maintenance and other issues that happen with the site. It doesn't have to do with the variance.
Yes. Sure, from the audience. Mr. Drilling, is that right? Mr. Braun, go ahead and I'll open the hearing again and let you speak for a moment. Make sure you speak in the microphone and.
Thank you. I've been listening to all the discussion. I just wanted to hit two small things. By granting this variance, you do not ensure that this arrangement continues to succeed, but by denying it, you absolutely ensure that it fails. So that is one consideration. If this variance is denied, this is gone and it's not coming back because we have to build an enclosure. We're not giving up 4 parking spaces to do it. We're going to go to small containers and there will be new problems and new hearings with new parties at different locations than ours who can't get rid of their garbage. So that is an assured failure if that happens. If the concern, and what I hear is that one of the big concerns is how do we make sure this continues, right? That if we grant this variance and this collaboration is one of the reasons that we do that, how do we ensure that that continues to happen? And I hear council saying that the only way to do that within the variance is to condition it upon the continued maintenance of the size of the containers. And if you think carefully about that, bigger containers cost more money. So the ownership of the building doesn't want to kick everybody out and then pay for the $3,000 a month container. If they're going to kick everybody out, they're going to go to a smaller container. That triggers them having to put an enclosure up. If they're going to keep the large containers, they need the other people in the neighborhood to contribute monetarily to maintaining the trash removal for that. So I think the market takes care of that motivation for this to be a continuing arrangement, at least as long as council suggested, the variance is conditioned upon maintenance of the same size container. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Braun. Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Is there any more comment from the board? Mr. Ingraham.
I think it probably should be mentioned, at least amongst us, the board members, that it is on multiple public transit lines when we're dealing with the need for parking spaces. If I'm knowledgeable about the area, there's a bus station right on the other side of the building, or a bus stop. And so it would be just a choice by the building owner to not, they value those parking spaces enough where they will choose to have the smaller containers and deal with the other issues that will come in that area.
Okay, thank you. Well, folks, I'd entertain a motion here, or else we can keep talking about this all night. Either in favor of adopting the variance as applied or denying the variance as recommended. Mr. Ingraham.
I propose we adopt staff findings.
There's been a motion to adopt staff findings and deny the variance. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Blanford?
I want to go on record once again
Yes,
that
ma'am, Ms. Brantz-Korsh.
I think that this is a real tragedy in the sense that we are not, as a board, taking our responsibility to look at practical difficulties when it comes to something that is efficient, effective, good commercial economic use, and a good environmental stewardship of both the property as well as multiple areas. So I'm sorry to see that it's very obvious that it will pass, but I do want to commend once again the staff, that I think staff does a good job of presenting it, and I'm sorry that we don't, as a board, look to some of those reasonable adjustments. That's why it's called the Board of Zoning and Adjustment. To me, it's an adjustment to allow a variance, just like it's an adjustment to go to a 1-foot variance as we did earlier in our approval, rather than a 5-foot variance for a setback. We need to be able to do some of these variances, I think, appropriately. So I'm sorry to see that.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Grants-Korsch. Are there any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, Ms. Blanford, would you call the roll?
Board Member Callahan.
Aye.
Grants-Korsch.
Nay.
Ingram.
Aye.
Johannesson is absent. Smikarova.
Nay.
Wang.
Nay.
So we have 2 yeas and 3 nays.
With that, the motion fails.
I make a motion to approve the variance.
There's been a motion to approve the variance by Ms. Mikarova. A second by Ms. Grants-Korsch. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Would have the condition that the size of the containers be maintained as they are.
There's a motion that the size of the containers is maintained. Is there a motion on the have you considered whether or not the number of containers should be maintained? Or how that might be impacted by other trash collection in the future, organics and whatnot? Mr. Ellis has a comment.
Vice Chair Softly, members of the board, I do get a little bit concerned because, again, the market, we're not going to be able to control something in the event, like an exact size or exact number, because, if the garbage collection industry changes a little bit and the size standard changes a little bit, it'll be kind of hard to, make that. It'll be difficult to enforce, especially if the company itself doesn't even provide those sizes anymore. That would be a major concern, and we'd be stuck in kind of a weird enforcement issue. I understand what you're trying to get at, Board Member Smikarova. I'm not sure what a good motion would look like exactly. I'm sorry. I'd like to give a little bit more clarity on that, just so it's an enforceable condition, but we don't run into something where we're obstinately trying to make them change the size of something.
Yeah.
So
I was actually speaking more of volume, so that the same volume of trash be able to be accessed from the site, from the location. At least the same minimum that's currently there, because it might be less trash in the future if we get better at compacting it and doing weird stuff with it. But as much as we can maintain what is currently in place as we approve it today, if it should be approved.
Vice Chair Softly, Board Member Smikarova, I think that would be a good way of handling it. A more general kind of discussion, the same volume and scope and scale of the existing trash enclosures. That way, if they have to make a change due to the company changing sizes slightly, we wouldn't run into any enforcement issues, but everything would still be met with that condition at that point.
So if they go to a smaller one, then they got to do the containers, and they have to do the enclosure. Yes. Sure.
So I'm going to ask some clarifying questions to make sure I understand the condition properly. You just let me know if I don't have it right. Your condition would be to require that the applicant continue to provide, at a minimum, the current volume of trash and recycling refuse in the broadest definition as a condition of granting the variance.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any other comment on the motion or on the condition?
Does the condition then incentivize are we incentivizing them to generate a certain number of trash? I guess that's what I'm concerned about. I'm trying to wrap my head around the minimum, maximum,
Well, incentivizing them to provide the same amount and fill it with trash, because if they didn't, then they would but they did maybe have to use smaller bins and then build the enclosure, which is what they don't want to do.
But, so we're requiring it not by the size, but by the volume of trash that's being generated. So if a business comes in that generates less trash, but they're still maintaining the large bins, but they're generating a lower volume of trash, would that then trigger them to come back before us?
That was my understanding, Mr. Braun.
Okay.
Maybe I didn't articulate that clearly, but they
Okay.
would continue to provide the same volume of trash receptacles as are currently provided. Is that consistent with your
Yeah, oh no, I don't want
conditions?
to regulate how much trash
Yeah,
they make.
that's what I was like, wait a
Yes,
minute.
it's volume of the container.
Okay. Mr. Ingraham?
I was just gonna add the word capacity, the capacity of amount of trash that can be processed.
Can I also just hear the justification for all of the different pieces to be met?
So the first finding, I do think that this particular site is quite unique for the mix, for the number of businesses, for the businesses that don't have access to the alley or to practical individual trash service. For the second finding, which is reasonable manner, I think that it's reasonable to provide trash for your businesses in a city that has lots of people coming and going. And for the third, I don't think that it's gonna change the central character, because I think the central character for this area is shared trash bins in some places, and I think we would just have to receive any incoming variance requests for nearby locations and consider them individually based on those locations.
And I will reiterate that every application for a variance is unique and non-precedential. I understand that things might rhyme, but there is no precedent-setting power of this body. Every property is unique in some way from each other. I'll buttress your finding for reasonableness to say that we've established there's a relatively minor impact on the neighborhood by not screening the existing trash. As we've heard from testimony, we've seen photos to that effect.
Agreed.
And then, would you restate the condition in your own words so that we get it on the record nice and clear?
Isn't this being recorded?
I've said it too many times and said it differently enough that I want to make sure it's,
The condition that the existing volume of the containers, the existing volume of the existing containers and the capacity they have to remove trash as it is today when this motion is being made.
is maintained,
Is
correct?
maintained. Sorry. Yes, is maintained.
Okay. And I have lost track, so we'll consider that a motion. Do I have a second on that motion? We have a second by Ms. Grants-Korsch. At the risk of new comments, I'm going to ask, are there comments on the motion and the conditions? I think we're all on the same page now as far as what we're talking about. Seeing nothing, Ms. Blanford, would you please call the roll?
Board Member Callahan.
Aye.
Grants-Korsch.
Aye.
Ingram.
Aye.
Smetanova.
Aye.
Wang.
Aye.
That's 5 yeas and 0 nays.
Okay, and with that, the variance request is approved. If you have any further questions with staff about other issues or this matter, please direct them to Mr. Liska. Thank you for coming down and providing testimony today. All right. Is there any new business or old business we need to discuss before we adjourn for the day?
Sorry.
Okay. Seeing nothing, I guess, sure, sir, I'll allow you to make a comment here.
My name is Doug Jones. I'm here on behalf of Mount Carmel Church. We had our approval of our impervious surface, and part of the reason we had to reduce the area was because the park board wanted $23,000 for us to put turf on their property. So we had to change our layout and modify it. But the fact is that turf is pervious, and the fact is that with 6-inch square and timed it and so on. And I think it's something that, we had to spend over $4,000 to appear here today to get this approval. We had to have a survey and we had to have the permits necessary. And I think that in our community, especially for a nonprofit organization like a church, is really crazy. And when we're providing to our community, we're doing this because we have a daycare facility on site that provides education for 20 children on a daily basis. We worked every day during the pandemic, and I think except for 1 week, providing service to the families that count on us. And I think your group should go back to the council and say, we need to rethink some of these things and requirements that we had to come forward and pay $4,000 to appear to get your.
You didn't have to pay $4,000 to appear, that was for your survey.
You're right.
And a
But
survey is
we had to have a survey to appear.
But a survey is always good, and it will never do you harm in how that works.
Thank you for coming down, and the process is the process, but we do understand.
I'm also a property owner of one of the properties that we discussed today, the variance. So,
Well, you got a twofer, you
I think,
yeah, I did. I got a free ride, so.
okay, well, if there's no other business before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn for the day.
So moved.
Moved in second, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, we're adjourned.